back to my golf fantasy podcast. I'm your host, Ryan. That's Wendell. We're going to touch on some things this week, how the Farmers Insurance Open went and how the Waste Management Open is going to look. So first, let's talk about the Farmers Insurance. I mean, what's there to talk about? There's actually only one story on this one. So you want to take that away?
Rosie, man, his historic victory, 45 years old, wins the 2026 Farmers Insurance Open, wire to wire, dominant fashion, 23 under, 7-shot margin. I mean, the guy's becoming an ageless wonder. It's impressive to see.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't know there was going to be such an advantage starting on the north or the south course. And after, it happened, he started on the north and he got that early lead and he just never relinquished it. I mean, he still played super well on the south course. But day one, the only stat really that other than Rose winning is I think it was 5 of the top 50 after day one played the south course. So the north course just dominated.
Yeah.
And maybe a lot of the guys that started on the south just thought they had to put in like 6 rounds for round 2 on day 2 and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think he fired a 62 day one, Rosie did, and didn't relinquish it after that. It was impressive. I think to your point, guys felt that they had to really step it up a notch and made some errors, and Rosie just again, what a dominant victory.
Yeah. The only other headline really was Brooks' first tournament back. And for me, this was a warm up for the Waste Management for him. I was not expecting him to even make the cut. And listen, he
barely
drops
did.
He drops an eagle, I think, on 16 on day 2 in order just to get past that cut line, and then had a very mediocre showing. But I mean, he's not out of form, right? Like, that's a tough tournament. He's won at Torrey Pines, the U.S. Open when it was there, I think 2019.
Yep.
So, he's familiar with that course. I would have expected with his familiarity to maybe play better. But he's had some time off, but is he ready for this week? I don't know.
Yeah, he's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. Obviously, everyone's going to want to see how he performs here after he gets his feet under him after a few events. I think he's like I said before, I think he's got the he's obviously got the talent. He's kind of taken a step back the last couple of years being on the live, I think. But and I don't know if you saw the reporters talking to him about that recently, about his major, how he hasn't really performed in majors, and Brooks had some, pretty interesting words for them. But I think he's got a chip on his shoulder, and he wants to prove everyone wrong. So he'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on here.
Yeah, well, let's get into my golf guy. It wasn't a spectacular performance by us last week, so we showed up there, and you had Alex Smalley and I had Taylor Pendrith, and what happened?
Yeah, nothing. We both of us didn't do so well last week. I mean, Smalley, his round 1 started okay, -2. Obviously followed that up with a +4 and missed the cut by a couple of strokes. Had a pretty crucial, bad double bogey on the back 9, too. That kind of just really sealed his fate. But they just didn't get the bounces that we thought they would, and we'll have to kind of revisit the drawing board here this week.
Yeah, Pendrith, he was one shot off the cut. Started on the south, which wasn't great for him. And he was one of those guys that was struggling to put up numbers on the north on day 2 in order to make that cut, putting probably too much pressure on himself. I'll tell you, in the future, I'll be second guessing my picks on who's going to start on the north and the south. It seems like somewhat of an unfair advantage to have a more chill time on the north course. And Pendrith definitely couldn't handle that pressure.
Well, that's just it. I mean, you get the north course or the south course, different conditions on different days. Some guys get lucky and they get the easier course with the good scoring conditions. Other guys get the easier course with bad scoring conditions, and it just unfortunately just sometimes it doesn't work out for them. But I agree, it's something we're gonna have to keep an eye on here for future guys we're taking, and whatnot.
I mean, this trend kind of works into our DFS last week. So, but this one's my favorite. I'm not sure if I kind of found out how Aaron Rai ended up withdrawing from the event, and it was like a minute before his tee time. And it was like, did you ever get your money back from DraftKings on this one?
I didn't. I still haven't heard back. And I You said you figured out a reason because I was doing some searching and trying to look up exactly why, but this was super frustrating for me. Obviously, I was checking my lineup obviously before the start of the event, and as everyone should, and if you don't, definitely do. But I checked it with about 30 minutes before. Everything was good. Next thing you know, I see the event started. I go on, and sure enough, I saw the news that Aaron Rai withdrew, and that's really obviously got me off to a pretty pretty rough start in this, having a guy already not going to get you. Not only did he not get to play the 2 rounds and then get me points and then miss the cut, which would have been, I would have been okay with that. He got me no points at all, even from the get go. Is always going to, it's going to be tough to come back from that, and my lineup didn't perform well at all.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to run through like some of the hits and misses? Because your top end did pretty well for you. It was the guys at the bottom that just kind of, including Smalley, your golf guy.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, Cameron Young, he ended up finishing tied for 22nd at 10 under. Had a few good rounds. First, second round, it was -2, -4 respectively. Third round is kind of what hurt him. That 72 even par really the field pulled away from him at that point. He kind of came back with a -468 in the final round to get back into the top 25. He did pretty well. But, he had some excellent iron play this week or last week and finished tied for 11th, -12. It's great first round. I think he was. I was like after that -8 first round, 64. I was like, okay, he's gonna be in contention. But followed that up with a +1, was -3 in the third, -2 in the fourth. And that just kind of, yeah, he had good rounds, just not enough to really catapult him into contention there with, how Rosie was playing. English, obviously, previous winner here, past winner here. Didn't start well for me at +1, shot -4 in round two, and then did have a great moving day in round three at -5, but ended up coming tied for 22nd. And then you kind of go into the bottom half here. That really hurt me with Aaron Rai withdrawing with about 5 minutes before the event, slowly missing the cut, and Putnam shot +3 on day one, just couldn't come back from that and followed up with an even par 72. Yeah, like you said, top half of my lineup was solid. I think I picked really my first three guys were strong, and had I hit on some of the guys later on in that kind of in that 7,000 range where I took some shots. Could have been a different week for me, but very poor performance by DFS lineup this week due to some bad luck and some poor choices.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I had any better luck. I didn't have a guy withdraw. That's about it. Ludwig, man, I watched his first round. I was following him because I was like, oh, perfect. He's gonna be featured. He's in the feature group. Playing with Brooks, playing with Homa. So I was following that pretty like solid all day. He rolled off 5 bogeys in a row on the back nine. And honestly, I just, with Rose taking off and Ludwig dying, I almost stopped watching. I couldn't watch anymore when he got those 5 bogeys in a row. And then he finishes it off with birdie to finish his round. Right. So he was +8 at one point and then goes birdie to finish the round. And I'm like, man, just if you could have just turned 3 of those into pars,
Yeah,
we would been good. He actually started bogey, birdie, bogey. Like this guy couldn't get a par all round. He was just birdieing or bogeying absolutely everything. So kind of killed me.
that hurts.
Deflated my lineup.
You pay top dollar 10,400 for a guy, and he doesn't make the cut and get you any significant points over the weekend. It's always going to hurt your DFS lineup, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And otherwise, Pendrith we already spoke about, and everyone else made the cut. Taylor Moore, that's a fun one. This is the guy I ended up following a lot because I put a stretch out there that this guy is going to be performing well this week, and I got him very low. Had a good first round. Went -4 on the north, and then he finished -1, +1, -1 on the south for the last 3 rounds. So he couldn't get it together on the south course. I was still happy with going that low, getting a 66. But if you're gonna win in DraftKings, your top end guys have to perform. If you're gonna pay top dollar, they need to be in the top 5. They need to be getting 100, 120 points, for these things, and that just didn't happen for me. But I'm confident that I'll have a better performance this
Well,
week.
Well, I mean, you still beat me by almost 100 points, which is just adding to your lead here in our friendly competition.
Yeah,
That was
that's
another,
it.
Aaron Rye withdrawing. That was another reason why I was so upset. Not just because I was probably going to not have a lineup that was going to finish in the money, but also because I knew it was going to hurt me in our friendly competitions.
That's
It
it.
was
We're working
unfortunate.
working through the list here, and I put a nice little asterisk for you just to note that it was an unfair situation. Even if they give you 50 points, I still won. Overall, I got the lead by about 125, 117. A nice little cushion to build. The American Express 2 weeks ago helps, right, with players getting 3 rounds in, even if they were cut. So that was a big time play there. But yeah, a nice little cushion I have. You can get me back this week. I think we got significantly different lineups coming up for everybody, so we can start up at that. But first, let's work into the waste management, the Phoenix Open. Just to start, this is my second favorite event of the entire season, right? Next to the Masters,
Yeah.
this is the event I'm looking to watch.
This is on my bucket list as a must-go watch event some year. Just it looks like it's so much fun, right? Everyone on the par 3 16th there, just the time they're having, everyone at this tournament. This is probably the closest tournament that the PGA has to an atmosphere that kind of Live tries to reproduce but can't. It's this is what Live wants their golf to be like. It just can't quite get up to the same level, and this is a fun one. This is a really fun one. I mean, it's a uh, just to kind of go over some of the core stats here, it's a par 71, 7,261 yards. There's 4 par 3s, 11 par 4s, 3 par 5s. The interesting thing about this golf course and where it's being played in Scottsdale, Arizona, it's actually 1,500 feet above sea level. So guys are going to get there early. Obviously, what this means is your ball's going to travel farther. So their distances are going to be a little bit different than some of those courses that are at sea level that they play, and it's going to take some adjusting and some time to do that. So, I saw some guys getting in Sunday, Monday. I've already seen some stuff on social media, practice rounds being played, guys talking about some of the different yardages that they're seeing and whatnot. I mean, this is standard stuff for these guys on tour. Obviously, they're playing all around North America and the world, so their caddies are going to have to work a little harder here this week, but definitely going to have to be something to keep an eye on. Um, it's um, it's definitely like we mentioned, the most fan friendly stop on tour, the most rowdy, with that iconic par 3 16th. It's high energy, and some guys love this environment. Some guys struggle in it, just because it's some people it loosens them up. Others it adds an element of extra pressure, because they're not used to guys throwing cans of beer on the 16th hole, or chirping people or chanting their names. So it definitely creates an environment that is fun to watch, and again, another reason why I want to go there. It's often a very much a low scoring event. It's an easier layout. The course is, it has wide fairways, very receptive greens. Can really lead to a birdie fest when scoring conditions if the wind stays down. But again, you're kind of factoring, obviously, the course conditions, the wind, and then also the atmosphere factor into this week, for these guys, especially in the early rounds, and that could all kind of affect a variety of things from pace of play to focus for some of these players. So it's going to be an interesting week. Excited for this one to get going, and see how the guys do here.
Yeah, imagine you're standing on 16 at the tee, and if that you hit a bad shot, they're gonna get booed. Like you're gonna get booed no matter who you are.
Yeah.
And if you hit a nice one, they're gonna cheer you. For me, I guarantee you, I'm putting one in the bleachers, like 100%. This is it's such high pressure, and so like when I was looking at past results, when doing some of my research, big names perform well here, right?
Mhm.
And the reason is because these guys put so much pressure on themselves that extra fan pressure is not as significant as the pressure they put on themselves, and they can combat that with performing much better than a player that has less of a history one at this event, or just less of a history of being in a featured group, right? So I think that's something to look forward to, maybe some big names staying at the top of the leaderboard this week. But so some of the key stats we want to touch on before we get into our picks: strokes gained on the approach and putting, right? These two stats of the strokes gained total of the last 5 years, 70% come from strokes gained approach and putting collectively. which is interesting because off the tee, like you mentioned, it's higher elevation. You get further distance off the tee, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it means that the approach game is probably a little more key, and the putting around the green is actually very low strokes gained around the green, whether it be that the fact that a lot of guys aren't off the green, but it's a situation where you got to put it on the green in order to give yourself a chance, right? For the last 5 years on both strokes gained and putting, there's a big stat. In putting, the champion finished top 3 for the last 5 years, and in strokes gained, they finished top 10 for the last 5 years. So clearly a distinguishing factor for guys who can hit good approach shots and putt well this week. Which leads me into the driving, right? So if strokes gained driving isn't really going to drive a factor on, whether your performance is good or bad, there's a couple things to look for, right? So TPC Scottsdale ranks top 5 for driving distance on average. That's because of the elevation, right? So guys
Right.
that typically hit it, 300 yards, sometimes getting to 320, 330. The guys that are typically further back at the 270 are now pushing the 300 mark, right? So it's a little bit different. The course isn't longer by any means, right? You said 7,200 yards. That's not a significant distance in PGA Tour standards. That's very average, right? So that's why driving distance isn't exactly a key that's going to benefit you a lot here, because the playing field's actually evened up a little bit. So that's why I took total driving. So total driving, because you do want to hit it far. You want those short iron shots in. That's how you're going to get your strokes gained on approach. And the accuracy comes because 9 of the 18 holes have water, right? So the water element comes into play. You want to be accurate off the tee. If we want to go back a couple weeks to your boy Akshay Patia, dropping one in the water and then never recovering, right? That could really, really rattle you. We talked about the fan element, the pressure element of this event being greater than maybe others. Add in the fact that the water's there when you put more pressure on yourself to try to make better shots because you're falling behind. This could be a very big thing into play, right? So guys who perform well are typically guys that have great total driving, which means it's their distance and accuracy collectively. So that was one of the key stats. And last is greens and regulation, right? So we touched on the strokes gained putting, right? Strokes gained around the green was below average in this tournament in the last 5 years. So players are not gaining strokes around the green. So you got to be on the green in order to try to score here. A lot of bunkers too, probably plays a little bit of a factor. So hitting the green in regulation is necessary to be successful. And the greens aren't overly challenging. Like you mentioned, big greens, right? So you got to hit them. These greens aren't super fast. They're not super slow. They're around tour average. So there's nothing to be too afraid of. Long putts, you can get them close. It's all about how many putts you can give yourself a chance to make in this event. So with that, pick one. It's always a well-rounded golfer that's gonna play score well here, but these are probably the key stats to look for in the waste management.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's like you said. I mean, these things. It could be a well balanced golfer that ends up winning this. You could have a guy who is great. Obviously gets in play off the tee, and their approach is great, and their flat stick has not been working recent weeks. But this week it kind of it kind of goes on fire, and they end up being a guy who's great contention. And weather's always going to be a factor here too. That could change things up. But those are definitely some of the key ones that we got to look at this week when making some of our selections for sure.
100%. So let's get into my golf guy. Like we mentioned earlier in the show, poor performance by both of us last week. And you got me 2-0 on the season, 2-0-1 if you want to call it. We'll ignore the tie. Who do you got this week? What's the reasoning for going as far down the board as you have?
So I went quite far down the board. And this guy kind of came on my radar because I'll get into it in a second, obviously, with my DFS lineup and how I constructed it. But it's really the main reason this guy got on my radar in the first place. Was I was making my DFS lineup, and I had to kind of, because of some of the guys I took, I had to look at some guys that were pretty far down there. And this guy, just his name popped up. I started doing some research and really started to fall in love. So my guy this week is Michael Kim. He is probably not on a lot of people's radars, but if you watched the tournament last year, he was runner up here last year. So knows the course. Crowd doesn't bother him. Um, and he was, last year he was actually eighth in strokes gained on approach that week, 17th in strokes gained off the tee, and putting he was 34th at this tournament last year, which got him, came second place. And so he's a guy that I think is, when it comes to some of these things that you were talking about, strokes gained approach, he's been strong. He's typically been in the top half of the tour. Strokes gained tee to green, he's been strong in that quarter category. Bogey avoidance, he's been excellent in the top half. Putting, he's always been average or below average. So like I mentioned, like if he's a guy who some of these putts start dropping this week on some of these easier greens that are pretty receptive, I like his chances again this week. He's also had a decent start to his year, came tied 31st at Sony in the first term of the year. He was cut at American Express, but just because of his performance here last week, I think he's going to have, that confidence coming in, and because of the way his game is made up, I really like him to have a strong showing here this week. And that's those are the kind of the main reasons why I took Michael Kim.
Yeah, I saw him. I definitely didn't pick him or think much of him, but I agree. He has a lot of good qualities here. So I'm scared to go that far down the board as much as you did.
When you
But
got a lead like I do in my golf guy, I mean, you can take a few shots, take a few chances, right? So this guy is he's definitely not maybe he's not going to be on everyone's list as a favorite this week, but he's a guy that I thought was worth taking a shot on. That would be somebody you wasn't going to be on your radar. So we'll see how it plays out for me.
I'll be rooting for him because I like him a lot. But definitely I'll be rooting for my guy over yours, so that's fine. So I took Maverick McNeely. Um, I really liked his game. So interesting thing about him is top 10 finish each of the last 2 years here. Okay. His total driving isn't fantastic. So he
Hmm.
has great distance off the tee, but his accuracy is not quite as good. So that leads into his greens and regulation being relatively mediocre on tour. Still in the, I think 65. So that still is above tour average. But where he really shines is strokes gained approach and strokes gained putting are both in the top 25. So with his driving distance, his strokes gained approach, stroke gained putting, I think this is why he can perform well here. He has proven history of playing well here, and he's coming off of a T23, T24, T10 each of the last 3 weeks, right? So he just finished the Farmers Insurance top 10. So he's playing very well leading it to this tournament. Played a very tough course, and for rounds 2, 3, 4 last week, he shot 70, very consistent on the South course, right? No, not spectacular, not overachieving by any means, but he knows how to play tougher courses. I think him playing well last week will actually lead into him performing even better this week. So the one thing I've overlooked in maybe my golf guy previous picks is recent performance. I've been looking more like the course stats and their history at some of these courses. This, to me, I think this is McNeely's chance to perform well here with his history, his recent events, and how his game is kind of a little more tailored for this particular course. Well, I liked him at 3,500, plus 3,500. Not exactly the top favorite, but he's getting to the top 10 favorites. So I'm cheating a little bit to your plus 11,000. But I definitely think he's going to perform well at this event.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I didn't know if I was an error on the form, the sheet there, if it was plus 11,000 or plus 1,100. I was like, maybe my guy wasn't that much of a long shot, but pretty
Yeah,
sure he's plus 11,000.
I think the problem is though we never went that far down. I need to
Not
add
enough
room
space.
for another zero.
No, Maverick, I like him too. He was a guy that I looked at quite a bit this week too. Obviously, as you mentioned, his previous play, Sony Open tied 24th and tied for 10th or came 10th, solo 10th last week. The game's trending in the right direction, like you mentioned. The strengths to his game really align well here, and he's a guy that he's a guy on DraftKings, I think, that we'll talk about here in a second, that it's going to be on a lot of guys' radars because he's not kind of in that top tier that guys are going to be paying for, but he's right after those top tier guys, and he's going to be in a lot of affordable lineups. He's a great pick. As much as I'd like to bash your pick, I think he's a solid one this week.
Well, you know what? Actually, that gets into our DraftKings lineup and our DFS this week. We took on two very different strategies, and because a couple weeks ago we kind of bashed the Scotty strategy,
Mhm.
and it ended up being the winning one. So I think you're going to try to replicate that here.
Yeah, yeah. It was that strategy when I did a fun lineup a couple weeks ago really worked out for me. Because of some of the research that I did and was able to kind of pick a few guys as dart throws that ended up hitting. I decided to try to replicate that again this week. Um, within my lineup here. Did you want me to go through it? I know the winner normally you won last week, so normally the winner goes first. But I'm happy to kind of give you my strategy here if you want me to run through it first.
You know what? Give the Scotty strategy because it's the more interesting one
Yeah.
of how you construct a lineup with a guy almost 15,000 on DraftKings. So like I'm interested on how you came to this being the lineup you wanted to pick.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. So I identified obviously Scotty after 2 weeks ago. He was low owned in a tournament that he ended up winning. When I say low owned, I mean, he was under 30% owned. I think he was 26%. So if you can get a guy in your lineup who wins and he's not, 50, 60% owned, you're going to be doing quite well. And so I feel like people were still going to be off him to kind of come and win back to back starts here. So I wanted to bet on him. And he's really he's a guy who, again, I want to knock on wood. He's pretty much a lock to come in. He's going to finish in the top 10 somewhere. I feel like in pretty much every tournament he plays right now, just where his game's at. So if you can get a guy who's going to give you points and be a lock through the weekend for you, even if he doesn't win and at ownership that's less than 30%, I mean, sign me up. But that does make you have to pivot your strategy quite a bit because I talked about balance approaches that I took in the past. This one worked for me 2 weeks ago, so I want to try to replicate it. So taking Scotty at my first pick at 14,500, I take him. I don't even look at anybody else. I immediately go down to the sixes after I take Scotty because I want to build my lineup out where I'm going to pick a few of the guys that I think are dart throws that have a good chance at winning. And then I'm going to go and work my way back up to taking guys who I like after Scotty in kind of the 7,000 range. So I took Scotty at 14,500. After Scotty, I went and actually, funny enough, I started looking in the 6,000s, and a guy's name who popped up for me was was Joel Damon. Damon, right? I think it's Joel Damon. Um, He's not going to be on a lot of guys' lists, but he had a great showing last week, tied for seventh. And it was, he's a guy that this year that's got a chip on his shoulder. He's playing off conditional status because he ranked out of the top 125 in the 2025 FedEx Cup. So he's got to play his way into, tour status again. And he just recently got a sponsors exemption for this tournament. And based on his performance last week, at 6,900, I like the way he's trending. So if I'm going to take a guy in the sixes, I want a guy who's playing well and has played well leading up to this. And Joel Damon's a guy that's done that. He came tied for 38th at the American Express, tied for seventh last week. And now, we're coming into this tournament in good form. He's a guy that you saw here in previous years. He's taken his shirt off on 16. He embraces the energy, the crowds. At 6,900, I want to take a shot on him. He's a sneaky grinder that I think is going to, maybe if he can get the putting to put together this week, which is normally a week for him, if that keeps on kind of trending in the right direction, I think he's going to be a guy who can make the cut and get you some points in the weekend. So I went Scotty, then I immediately went down to the sixes at Joel.
So Joel, for a sec there, Joel, interesting thing. I kind of had him a little bit on my radar. I was a little risk adverse here where I didn't want to touch him, but made the cut 3 of the last 5 years at this tournament. He's played this tournament the last 5 years. And like you mentioned, his putting's probably not the greatest, but his driving actually is great. And if he can get that little extra distance off the tee, in these conditions, he has what it makes to perform well here. And at 6,900, he could be a very good steal that low if he can chill out the demons that he has.
That's it. That's it. So I definitely took a dart throw, but again, an educated dart throw based on the numbers as well as his previous play leading into here. So after Joel, I knew I was at that point. I decided, okay, let's grab somebody. I was kind of looking at guys around 7,000. And I identified a guy who I think is, based on course fit here, is probably one of the best value plays this week, in my opinion, and that's Michael Kim. So he was at 7,200. I took Michael Kim as my third pick, my third pick here. Um, and he's somebody who I think his profile works really well for this week. He's got his strokes gain approach is extremely strong. His tee to green is as well. He was runner up here last week. As I kind of mentioned previous talking about him, finished eighth last year in this tournament, or sorry, runner up last year here. Finished eighth in this tournament last year in strokes gained approach, 17th in strokes gained off the tee, and 34th in strokes gained putting. So like he's already proven that he can play well at this course. And at 7,200 with the game he has and his makeup, I just think he's one of the best value picks this week at that low. You can't really find too many guys who have come top five in the tournament, with that makeup in the 7,200 range. And so that really helped me at that point. Look at my lineup. I've had two guys one guy that I think is a true dart throw. Michael Kim, I think is just a great value pick this week. Less of a dart throw, great value pick. And then that allowed me to kind of now jump up, and I like to jump up now to a guy who I really like this week, who I think is more on like the contenders category, and that's in Nick Taylor. And at 7,800, I also thought he was a bit of a steal. He's been playing well this season, tied for 13th at the Sony Open, tied for 27th at the American Express. I think there's at under 8K, I think there's huge value. His game works really well here. All the key metrics we're looking at when it comes to approach. On Bermuda greens, he's an extremely strong putter. In previous tournaments, you can kind of see some of his strokes gained putting on Bermuda. He's typically ranking in the top third of the tour. And around the greens, he's solid. So everything that we're kind of looking at here when it comes to strokes gained, irons and putting, he's not really super reliant on power. But what you mentioned with Joel, like he's a guy who he's going to get that extra yardage here with the elevation, and so all the other elements of his game really I think are going to line up here to him being a good showing. And so at 7,800, I really felt like I got a guy that should have been like 8,500. And so Nick Taylor here really helped give me like a solid number two to Scotty, I felt, with Kim kind of being that number three. And then I went with a guy who SH Kim. So as you can kind of see with my lineups, now I've got two Kims in my lineup. SH Kim is a play here that I really liked him. He's been kind of trending in the right direction. He was tied for 13th at the Sony Open, tied for 18th at the American Express, 63rd last week at the Farmers. So like he's a guy who's made all the cuts this year. At 6,800, if I can get a guy who's making cuts and his game suits the course well, and I think his does. I mean, he's not like approach. He's around average on tour. Putting can spike week to week. Off the tee, he's again around average. His consistency, strokes and consistency is volatile. But he's really capable of birdie streaks. And the salary range that he's in here, and based on his previous performances, I really like. Again, I always look for guys in the sixes who are trending in the right direction. And I think if you can find a guy who's consistently making cuts, that's a great pick in the 6,000s. So that's another reason why I took SH Kim. He's a guy I think that's going to be within DFS. He's got a high ceiling potential and low ownership. He's not a safe pick by any means, but I think he's going to be a guy who's not going to be owned a lot, and that's going to surprise a lot of people this week. And then rounding out my Kim lineup, my third Kim of the lineup is Tom Kim at 6,600. I think Tom has been obviously very inconsistent over the last 2 years, but Tom Kim's got the elite upside in his game. He is very strong, top third of the tour in strokes gained approach, top half of the tour in strokes gained tee to green, par four scoring. He's in the top quarter of the tour, and putting's always been average for him. So he fits Scottsdale because the course really rewards precision iron play, and that's a key strength of his game. So really, this is a guy who I think his birdie conversion ability is going to be high this week. He's going to have a lot of chances. He really actually he embraces the loud, chaotic environment that you're going to see here as well. And so I think he's one of the better value plays alongside with Michael Kim. Obviously, Michael Kim being a little bit more expensive at that 7,200 mark. I think Tom is one of the best value plays under 7,000 in my opinion this week. Has an excellent ceiling, and if he comes and plays and his flat stick is rolling in some putts here this week, I really like where he's going to end up. So that's my three. That's my I call I like to, that's my Kim lineup. And again, it's one of those structures where because I took Scotty, I had to look for some diamonds in the rough, and I really think with my Kim trifecta here, where we found something. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they perform.
Yeah, wasn't Tom Kim the one who dropped that in the President's Cup, the bunker shot to like win a hole near the end for the international team?
It was him. It was him.
This guy loves pressure. I agree. This guy could love this crowd, can perform well. He made the cut the last 3 years here, finished 17th
Yep.
2 years ago. So this guy doesn't shy away from loud crowds, fun atmosphere. Really like good pick for getting that low. So very interesting lineup, and I like that you can see our side by side for people who are watching, because you can see that Nick Taylor is your second highest value guy and he's my lowest value guy, right?
Yep.
So there's a big discrepancy in how we built our lineups. So what I did was, as a different strategy to you is I ignored Scotty. I said, okay, you know what, if Scotty wins, he wins, but I don't want to try to get a lineup where I'm trying to pick value picks. I was
Yep.
like, how can I pick a lineup where all of these guys have a legitimate chance of winning instead of who's going to be, a legitimate chance of top 20, top 32 to collect with Scotty's win, essentially, is what yours is. And so I already talked about Maverick McNeely. Plays well here, great game for this course. I loved picking him at the 9,100, and with 9,100, I mean, I'm already 7, 8 players deep. If now, like, if you want to look, we ignored Scotty, I ignored Xander Schauffele, Siwoo Kim, Cam Young, Decky, Ben Griffin, Sam Burns, Matt Fitzpatrick, and Victor Hovland, who are all above him. Okay. So, like, that's a significant list that I kind of passed through in order to land at Maverick McNeely as being my guy there. Right. So, I like Maverick's game more than the rest of those guys. I mean, aside from Scotty. But I think he can perform better than some of those guys. So my next pick was interesting, and it was actually like my actual last pick. So I'm gonna skip Tagala right now, and I'm just gonna go right to Spieth. Jordan Spieth, I could not leave this guy off my list. This guy was the first guy I was taking, right? So finished fourth, sixth, 60th, fourth. For the last 5 years, he was top 10, and twice he was top 5.
He's played so good here. So true.
It doesn't matter how good or bad he's playing at any particular time. He just loves this course and this atmosphere,
Yeah.
right? And his game's pretty good for this. Like, his driving actually is not fantastic, but his length is very good. His strokes gain approach and strokes gain putting are both above tour average. It's still ranks in the 50s, 60s, but it's still decent enough to perform well here. Clearly, with his history, I can't ignore that. Like, there's no way I was removing him from the list, right? So I'll ignore, and something I said earlier, the thing I usually overlook is, let's say recent history. I'm going to ignore a little bit of that with Jordan, just because, you know, also he's played high pressure situations and he's performed. So I'm not worried about him performing at this event. And so I love that pick at 6,200.
I like him
And
too. And
then
just to kind of piggyback off that, I tried to have him as my number two and make a lineup around it. I just couldn't do it and make it so that actually like the people that I was taking, because you have to go down into like the 62s at that point. And when you get into those, like, you're looking at guys like I'm gonna like Eric Van Ruyen and Patton Kazire. Like these are guys I had to take that I really didn't like this week, and so I just couldn't do it with Jordan. But I really like that pick, and I tried my hardest with a Scotty lineup to do it. I just couldn't get him in there.
That'd be a sick lineup. Scotty and Jordan in the same
Yeah,
one. That would have been great.
yeah.
But it take me to my next one. I also couldn't leave this guy off the list. Recent history, not necessarily the event, just recency in his performance. Pearson Cody.
Mm,
Loved his game. You know what? And he was never on my radar probably at the start of the year. This guy is performing super well in the last few weeks. He's been at the top of the leaderboard, finished top 10 last week. Just a solid performer. He ranks top 20 in driving distance, right? So again, as much as accuracy still matters, he's still ranking there. And his greens and reg are top 5. So this guy is putting the ball far off the tee and he's hitting greens. And it's just like, all right, I'll take a guy that can finish, with the type of game he has, putting it deep into the fairway, maybe even a little bit in the rough. Even with his accuracy low, he still gets the ball on the green and reg. So love his game for this. And then I went to Corey Connors. So my next two were also locks. So like I was just like, I can't leave these guys off. Which leads me to show you my last pick and the decision I had to make there. So Corey Connors has made the cut each of the last 5 years here. His biggest issue is his putting. Can he putt,
yeah.
right? And I think you talked about Corey a few weeks back in his putting. Can he putt? Total driving, this guy's number 1 on the tour. He finishes top 20 in both accuracy and distance. It's crazy that there's a guy on tour that can hit this. So I'm not worried about him getting off the tee, missing all of the hazards. Corey Connors to me is a guy who can and has performed well here. His game is tailored for this. And then you mentioned Nick Taylor, not to elaborate much, but he also, the thing I think you missed on telling people, previous champion,
Right. Previous champion is a
right?
big one.
Previous champ. And then the year before he won, he was second, right? He finished 25 last year,
Yeah.
but still this guy loves this course. Another great pick. If you can't have Spieth in your lineup and you take Nick Taylor instead, like you said, at 78, that's a steal. He should be 85.
Huge value. Huge
Oh,
value.
great value that low. Which led me to my last pick, right? I had close to 9,000 left. And I looked, I could have taken JJ Spawn. I'm not loving his game right now.
You didn't like my boy Ricky Fowler?
So Ricky Fowler was on the list too, and Ricky's that guy too. You know, he loves these types of events. He has made the cut 3 of the last 5 years, and one of those 5 years he actually withdrew. And the only year he made the cut, he finished 10th.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not on the Ricky Fowler train. I told you this 2 weeks ago. I'm not on the Ricky Fowler train yet. He plays well, and you said his game's going to start to perform, but I'm not there. I'm not confident enough to give him that.
Yeah.
So I laid it out with 2 guys, okay? Is Brooks or Tagala.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Brooks was 87. Now, we talked about Brooks at the beginning of the show, how he performed at the Farmers Insurance. Remember, he is a 2019 champion at the Waste Management,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I honestly believe that the Farmers Insurance wasn't necessarily, he didn't necessarily care too much about it. He was working on his game to make sure he was ready for this tournament, right? And I think the fans are going to be happy to see him there. They're going to be rooting him. The crowd following Brooks will probably be bigger than the crowd following Scotty. Okay.
Yeah.
But Tagala, his recent performance, this guy's made the cut each of the first 3 events, finished, I think, top 15 last week, top 25 each of the previous 2 weeks, in that range. He is performing so well right now, and his game also looks very well for this course. He's also has a 3rd place and a 5th place finish here. And I'm just thinking that he can continue this kind of hot streak where Brooks is more like a fan pick for me.
Yeah.
So I want to say Tagala is more like the conscious, I think this guy is actually going to perform, not the I want this guy to perform, which is a Brooks Koepka pick to me. So that's why I kind of went with the lineup I did. I left that hole at that 9 to 8,500 range. and see where I got to, because I had locks in McNeely, Spieth, Cody, Connors, and Taylor. I loved all of these guys while doing my research.
What about obviously a guy you could have taken, which hasn't really done much yet this year, hasn't played much, but Morikawa, was he at all
Morikawa,
on
yeah.
your
Oh, what the thing I like about Morikawa, he was top 3 in strokes gained approach on tour last year,
yeah.
but his strokes gained putting was near the bottom. Oh, it was god awful. And you could say that about some of these guys who still perform well here. And the only time he played was 2 years ago, and he got cut.
Yeah.
So an element of his game doesn't fit well with this course, and his recent history doesn't say that he's going to perform well. He is the type of guy who can perform very well at any event he's at. I wouldn't be shocked to see him there, but I'm not going to be picking him to say, oh, this is his time to perform here. No, I'm not going to do that. And the other guy that, I took last week was Chris Gotterup, or I took him 2 weeks ago. And I really liked his game as well. But again, recent history, got cut the last 2 weeks, or the last 2 years, sorry, at this event. I would say that, is not something that is kind of making me feel like he's going to perform well here. Although he's number 1 in FedEx Cup standings right now because of his last 3-week performance, right?
Right.
Including the victory he had. So there was some very good options from that 84 to 9,000. I'm just hoping Tagala's the guy who's going to outdo them all, or else I'm going to look like an idiot.
Yeah, no, and that's why I was curious when I saw the gala there for you. I was like, there are some great options in that range, and you kind of already mentioned about Morikawa. Obviously, he's got the game to win or play extremely well anywhere. I think he's another guy who, just because he hasn't played much yet this year, and the only event he did play, he missed the cut. I think he's priced a little bit lower than he should be, in my opinion. But at the same time, I would have done the same thing. I think the Gala's the pick there, just based off his previous experience and performances here, as well as how he's trending in this direction. Really, really like that pick. And oddly enough, it left you with 600 remaining in your team. So, like, after you went through all this, did you go and look at other guys you could have maybe added, instead of Nick Taylor, Corey Connors, or did you just say, hey, I like the lineup I'm in. Let's just roll with it.
Yeah, so there was a couple. So Nikolai Hogard, who I
Mm,
took last
yeah,
week, he kind of was there. He was a little bit lower than everyone else, but I still liked him. So it was almost like I actually thought, okay, maybe I'll stay up instead of come down from the money. Goddard was one of them as
yeah,
well. And I did look at Sam Burns, okay? Sam Burns had a 3rd place and a 6th place finish here, and he's a fantastic putter. And so I'm like, this guy could perform well here. He's great off the tee. He has the makeup. His stroke gaze approach is pretty rough. And I guess the only thing I was thinking there, because at that point it's either Maverick or Sam Burns. And if everybody remembers earlier in the year, I took Sam Burns,
hmm
as my top guy in one of my DFS lineups, and he didn't perform well at a course where putting was the number 1 stat of players who perform well, and he kind of burned me. Sam
right.
Burns burned me. Uh, so you know what? I can get bitter at golfers. Okay. So for an example is Ludwig, this guy is not getting picked for the next 6, 8, 10 weeks for me. He screwed me once, and now he's riding the bench for a while. I am benching this guy. I have benched Sam Burns. As much as his stats say he should perform well here, I benched him.
Yeah, no, listen, I don't blame you. And I think there's always an element to that in some of our picks, right? As much as the data, the stats can show that a guy's a good pick this week. I mean, you got to feel good about taking him too. And, it's Sam Burns is one of those guys he's burned me in the past too. So, yeah, no, I really like your lineup. I think it's kind of a Canadian boys lineup again, sprinkled in with some great guys who have some great potential here. I think mine's going to surprise you and come out on top this week. But yeah, it'll be a good it'll be interesting to see what happens here.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, for me, one of my bucket list things for my life is to be on 16 on Sunday, wake up earlier than everyone else, art into the grandstands, get like a front
Don't go
row
to
seat.
bed the night before so you can get in there.
100%, 100%. I'll be passed out front row on the 16th while all my friends are reaping the benefits of me there getting there early, and just like whether it be sleep deprivation or intoxication, I'll be passed out there. But when that crowd roars for that hole in one that happens on the Sunday, I'll be throwing cans of beer as well. So it's one of my bucket list things to do. Absolutely.
100%. We're gonna make it there here one of these years. It's on the list to get away from these cold Canadian winters and go sit at 16 and watch this tournament. That'd be amazing.
That's it. So, I mean, closing remarks is enjoy this tournament. This is one of the most fun. And I think there's a lot of players that can perform well here. This isn't a challenging course necessarily, but it is definitely one of high pressure. And the guys who can handle that pressure will show at the top of the leaderboard by the end of the week for sure, I think.
Yeah. No, best of luck in your lineups, everyone, and yeah, looking forward to seeing how this plays out, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, gamble responsibly, right?
Absolutely.
See you guys.